With that, I'll introduce our co-host to introduce our first speaker, and we'll get rolling right away. So, Mike, turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Chandra. I am the executive director of the Nebraska Council on Problem Gambling, and I've been very fortunate to work with John and work with everybody at the University of Nebraska to help put this together. This is something that's come together over the last few weeks, and I've just been very blessed to have this opportunity to be a part of this. As far as our first speaker today, David is someone I've worked with over the past several years working in problem gambling treatment. I've been very fortunate to get to know him. As director of the Nebraska Gamblers Assistance Program, David Geier has led this program with a keen eye to detail and strategy. And all I can say is that as a problem gambler in recovery myself, the treatment provided through the Gamblers Assistance Program has saved my life. And I know that I'm not alone. And today, David will share some of his insights and data as the leader of GAP and provide more insight into his role. And with that, I'll hand it over to David.
Thanks, Mike and John. Good morning, everybody. Flattered by your introductions. I'm here to talk about our Gambler Assistance Program. You'll see on the somewhere in the literature here that I have the degree of JD. Ignore that. Being a lawyer is just part of my background, but what I do now is manage a state of Nebraska program from our office here in Lincoln. What we do is mainly provide counseling services to people who are diagnosed with addiction to gambling. It's called gambling disorder in the psychiatric literature. Our little program is one of about 43 or thereabouts around the United States. We're, I think, a little bit different from some of them in the sense that it's an independent program. That is, we're not dominated by either the governor's office or the legislature. Basically, what we have to do is comply with a set of laws and deal with state policy, but we do one thing only, and that is addiction to gambling. You see here that our annual budget's about $3 million. Two-thirds of it is devoted to the counseling service, and a big part of the rest of it is devoted to the process of training counselors to work in this field. So we train and certify, and we deal only with addiction to gambling. Out here in Nebraska, we've got loads of gambling. Years ago, when I first got involved in this program, there were a lot of people who said, well, we don't have any gambling in Nebraska. And I say, well, do you buy a lottery ticket? Well, yeah, but that's not, they thought of gambling as slot machines in a casino. Well, today, 2025, here we are. We have a lot of it. You can see right here, I've laid it out a little bit. Pretty soon, there'll be 10,000 opportunities around our state for people to put their money into a computer-driven video gaming device. We have 4 tribal casinos. These state licensed racinos are coming on board. There are 4 of them open now. A couple more of them are in the works. I'm real interested in item 5 on this. You see the 55 organizations conducting bingo in Nebraska. I was really remembering bingo as a child. It's a child's game. We had a lot of fun playing bingo. Well, guess what? It's a big deal. In fact, Bill Harrah, who started the Harrah's Casino operation, which is very big now, I think it's part of connected to MGM. But anyway, Harrah started off with a bingo game in Reno, Nevada, back in the early 30s. That's where he began. Today, Foxwoods, an enormous casino operation in Connecticut, has a huge bingo game with extremely big prize awards. So bingo itself is a significant gambling activity, highly regulated in Nebraska, and we have it. We also have all the other things. Basically, we have everything you could do in gambling. We have it in Nebraska. I like to give people a bird's eye view. This map shows you where it is. And the red dots on here are places where there are various kinds of businesses, convenience stores, bars, restaurants, laundromats have what we call, or what I call, gas station slot machines. They're kind of controversial around the country. Different states are having a hard time with it. But these are devices that resemble the slot machine you'll see in a casino. And they're located in all these locations. You see the blue stars on this map, and that is where the casinos are located. So again, we have border-to-border gambling of all kinds in our state. So what's our topic today? Well, it's, again, because you cannot escape the subject of gambling. The growth of gambling is astonished a lot of people, actually. I think it's really taken off as a result of the Supreme Court decision back in 2018, but also there's just been a big push to develop full-blown casino operations. Now we have about 1,000 state licensed corporate casino operations in the United States, about 500 or 600 tribal casinos. So we're approaching 2,000 brick and mortar casinos. Also, again, you see right here, I'm talking about this casino in your pocket. That smartphone is the coming form of the casino. So we're going to be focusing on the types of gambling opportunities there are as a result of this inescapable promotion, the advertising. Everywhere you go, everywhere you turn, it's gambling in one form or another. And as a matter of fact, what's really happened recently, especially I think, is that gambling has become normalized. It is a normal thing to do. Normal thing to go to the casino, normal thing to buy lottery tickets, normal thing to play on that little device in the laundromat while you're waiting for your dryer. It's just everywhere you go. Of course, it's touted as a fun form of recreation. But the enticement, the inducement is not just the recreation, it's the money. We know it's the money aspect. That's what we deal with in our program. And that's what we think that you all should be thinking about. How is gambling defined? This is an issue that we run into all the time too. And that is, there are people who claim that if you do a certain thing, it is not gambling because it involves skill. We've heard this year after year about poker. People who play poker say, well, it's not gambling. It takes great skill to be a winner at poker. Well, everybody in the gambling businesses sees poker as gambling. There's not much litigation about it. I'll talk about my lawyer hat here. But the Nebraska Supreme Court a few years ago agreed with a lower court that said, you cannot change the initial deal. The deal of the deck is where the gamble comes in. It's unpredictable. Now, what I'm showing you here on the screen is definitions of gambling. These are just two examples of the kinds of, let's say, linguistic contortions that people go through to come up with a way of defining the term gambling. They've had a hard time with it. That probably because gambling has been a subject of law in the United States since the beginning, but especially in the 19th century, when gambling was, let's say it was prohibited for the most part in large parts of the country, because there were a lot of scandals and lots of problems going on with gambling earlier in the 19th century. So as time went by, many states, many parts of the country just forbid gambling. In fact, in Nebraska, in 1875, gambling was prohibited totally. Now, of course, that's not the case today, but along the way, there have been all these struggles to define the term gambling, decide what kind of activity does it apply to. You can see here too, with these two definitions that I've shown you, the top one is from the psychiatric profession, and they talk about risk and hope. Risk and hope. The legislature now, they talk about it from a legalistic standpoint, bets and chances. So these are the two main features of most of the gambling that we deal with today. Risking or betting, in hope or taking a chance. These two definitions kind of illustrate one way of defining the concept of gambling. So I like to ask people to think about different activities and think about whether or not something is or is not gambling. Now, I'm not going to ask you to tell me your answers to this, but I want you to think about this. You think to yourself. I'm going to talk down through this list of 6 here so we can see what you all think about whether or not these activities are gambling based upon the definition that I've just talked about. The first one is, this is a favorite of Warren Buffett, the Berkshire Hathaway wizard from Omaha. He's talked about for years wishing that somebody who's employed in one of his Berkshire Hathaway companies could win $1 million by selecting every winning team in every game of the NCAA Spring Championship Tournament. Now, over the years, he found that nobody could do that. Nobody went all the way through every single game, so he kept tinkering with it until he came up with a way of making it less difficult, and somebody finally won some money. But the trick here, item 1 on this, is that it's free. If you're going to play the game, you're an employee of Berkshire Hathaway, and you do not have to spend any of your money in order to do this. So you're not risking money, you're just playing a game. Now, what Mr. Buffett has done is kind of mixed up concept of gambling and risk with fun. Just so you know, he's a fervent opponent of organized gambling. In fact, he's spoken outwardly about it more than once. So he's not a fan of casinos, but he certainly does have fun with his March Madness bracket game. Item 2 on there, buying crypto. Now, cryptocurrency is, of course, a big subject matter today. And again, Warren Buffett or people in the investment field, a lot of them say that it's a gamble. It's a casino. You buy this, you're gambling with your money. Well, again, this is me, but when you buy crypto, you spend some money to acquire the token. But what the token is worth is based upon a market. Like anything else you invest in, you buy it for a price, you hold it. It's worth what you can get for it if you go to sell it. Well, again, now you're in a market. If you buy it today, is it going to be worth the same thing in a week or a month or a year? That's based on markets, not based on the kind of algorithmic chance calculations that are involved in organized gambling that we deal with today. Item 3, day trading. Again, it's an activity involving stock market investments, largely. We've heard a lot about what's called zero-day options trading. These are contract transactions on the last day before an option contract will expire. There's a lot of back and forth trading of these, and people are trying to make some money with very short turnaround, putting some money into it, hoping to be able to sell it and get out of it quickly. Again, it's based upon a market. It's not based upon a computerized algorithm that we see, we'll talk about in a few minutes with a slot machine. Planting a corn crop, number 4 on here. You know, a few years ago, a member of the Nebraska legislature on the floor of the legislature said, well, farmers gamble every year when they plant a crop. Well, that's true. They do. There's a big element of risk and gambling involved in farming. However, again, it's a business decision whether to plant a crop. It's a business decision how much to spend on seed, chemicals, fuel, everything else that goes into farming, and also judging what that crop may be worth when you harvest the corn 6 or 8 months from now. So again, there's an element of a gamble, sure, but it is not the kind of gambling, at least in our Nebraska Gambler Assistance Program, that we are concerned about. Playing pinball, number 5. This is a mechanical game. The ability to win or lose in pinball is partly based upon the way the machine is set up. These machines have adjustable features to them that influence whether or not players are going to be able to succeed. But again, not our view that this is gambling, although I'll tell you that a few years ago, the Nebraska Supreme Court did rule that if you have a chance to win a free game playing pinball, that's gambling. Now, it goes on now, and I don't think anybody loses any sleep over whether a pinball machine is a gambling device, but still, it has an element of risk, not much. Item 6 is an item that I really want to talk with you about more and kind of focus on, and that is the parlay bet in sporting events. Now, this is clearly a gamble. And as a matter of fact, again, to the bookies, this has become their favorite because they have the ability to increase their profit margin by enticing gamblers to make these parlay bets. So item 6, out of this list of 6 on here, I'm going to say absolutely this one is without a doubt gambling. Now, your students in college are going to tell you that it takes great skill to be a smart bettor in a sporting gamble. Well, the most skillful people are the bookies. They have all the knowledge, they have all the computing horsepower. In a parlay bet, they are using their computers to run simulations in these games. They've got more horsepower than any college student could ever have. And they know everything about what's going on. Yet even at that, with all that advantage they have, they do not win 100% of the time. It is a mixture of skill and luck, risk, chance. There's no question about that. You cannot predict the outcome of an athlete's performance with absolute certainty. There's always a question of probability. Who would have thought that Carlos would have pulled it out in Paris after going down 2-0? Or who would have thought that the Chiefs would have been humiliated in the Super Bowl? That shows you these things illustrate the chance element makes it impossible to predict with certainty what's going to happen in a sporting event. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit more about these parlay bets because I think it's important to understand this because these are becoming a favorite of amateur gamblers. So a parlay bet is a list of events. Now look what I've listed here. I've got 6 different events. It doesn't matter what they are. They can all be in the same game. They can involve separate different players in different games, different sports, any number of things. The booking companies are mix and match. Take what you want. So I'm thinking in the mind of a student, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm looking at this first bet, and I think I'm going to be right. I have a 75% chance of being right. 80% on the second one. Go down the list. Every one of them is better than 50-50. Every one of them. Look at that. They all look like this is really, really a good combination of bets that I should make. And if I average them, it comes up to 70%. This looks like, like I say, almost a sure thing. But when you're looking at it from the standpoint of the corporate gambling interest, the bookmakers that are behind this, they don't think about it in terms of those averages. Even if they calculated the chances the way they're shown on here, they're going to calculate the probability of all 6 happening. All 6, like I show you on here. This is a calculation of probability based upon known probability calculations in the mathematical fields, and the bookmakers, excuse me, and the commercial gambling industry are experts at probability. And here, this shows you then that what appears to be a 70% chance of winning a bet turns out to be barely over 10% chance. Now, the bookmakers will entice a lot of amateur bets with gambles like this. An awful lot of times, your student is going to say, I'll put $10 on this. It's no big deal. Some other people are going to put a lot of money on it. And for the most part, a lot of them are going to lose. So I'm talking to you here about the beginning gambler, because I'm assuming that, again, in most of our experiences with college students, especially, we're talking about people who are just getting started with their gambling. They're not even of age in a lot of areas. But what our observation here in Nebraska in our program is just what I say. The gambler starting out now is going to be the problem gambler coming down the line. And I'm going to show you here these two lines on this graph. The red line on the bottom is the age when people first gamble. So when somebody comes into one of our program counseling offices, we ask them a lot of questions and we accumulate this data. This shows you that over the years, over 10 years, this is a couple thousand gamblers. They told us that the median, about, the midline, half of them were above or half of them below, started gambling by about the age of 18 to 20, somewhere in there. But look at the blue line on top. That's how old they were when they got into enough trouble to decide that they needed to go see a counselor to get some help. Now, this gap from start to counseling, about 20 years, has held true in Nebraska here over the past 10 years. Over the years that gambling has expanded and evolved in our state. I can break it down a little bit for you too. Here you see the people who are admitted into counseling. They're coming in for help when they're in their late 20s, 30s, 40s. 28% of them are in the 26 to 35 age bracket. But if you stretch it out a little bit, 73% of the people who seek help for counseling problem or gambling problems are in this age group when they should be at their peak. They should be at the best stage of their life. They should be building a family, a career, getting progress toward success in life. Instead, here they are coming for help because they become addicted to gambling. Here's where they started out. Those same people, that's when they came to us for help. That's when they started. Look at the big bulge before age 21. 78% of 2,000 clients in the Nebraska program started gambling before they were 21 years old. And 56% of them before they were 18. Look at them down to the age 10 and under. Starting early, getting in trouble late. How does that happen? We think, again, part of it, normalizing gambling. And when it's normalized, here's what happens to the gambler. Operant conditioning. Now, those of you with a background in psychology may think of Pavlov's dogs. Ring the bell and they salivate. There was a psychologist back in the 50s, Dr. Skinner, and he demonstrated how you could get rats and pigeons to persistently and addictively try to peck and get a reward if you did it in uncertain amounts at unpredictable times. And this operant conditioning is an effect on the human brain that may well be just a function of the overall concept of mathematical probability. Because if you have true probability with a set of random numbers, it is really difficult to know which number is going to come up next. So random number generating, random numbers, uncertain probability leads to operant conditioning. And that is the gambler keeps trying over and over again because the next time I'm going to win. And that's the cognitive distortion, the gambler's fallacy. And that is the thought process, well, the coin came up heads 8 times in a row. The next one has to be tails. Well, it doesn't, but that displays an ignorance of, again, the concepts of probability versus certainty. And that permeates everything in organized gambling. So these characteristics of what is going on when someone gambles then interact with what are called the neurotransmitters, that is the functioning of the human brain. This has been investigated at a great length by people in neuropsych, brain science, and they're kind of narrowing it down to these are natural chemicals in your brain. And the way these interact with your activity, it leads to addiction. The American Psychiatric Association has defined what we now call gambling disorder. This is the essential feature as they define it. From our standpoint, it is the person continues to perform this activity even after it has caused them great harm. The harm is often, mostly financial, but not entirely. It harms families, personal relationships. People are enticed to get into crime, all kinds of things. But the main thing is the recurrent maladaptive behavior. That is behavior that goes on even though it's not working and it's not promoting the good life that people wish they would have. What are we going to do about it? Well, this is your problem. I've been around too long to know how to deal with today's college age or high school age students. That's up to people who are closer to them and who know how to deal with it. Education, though, is about the only thing we can hope to do, and that is teach the young people what they're getting into when they do this, teach them how to understand it, to decide whether or not they want to do it. I have believed for an awful long time that our young don't want to be deceived. They don't like it when old people like me lie to them. They don't want to be misled. So what should they know about gambling? They should know the truth. That's all. Now, if they know the truth and they decide to do it, that's up to them. They're free to do it. But the truth is really the only weapon we have. First of all, they need to understand that gambling is not just harmless fun and entertainment. I've already talked to you a bit about some of the problems that people have. We'll get into that a bit. Also, is it a smart way to make money? There are surveys that are done of college and high school age. And one of the questions is whether or not you believe that gambling is a good way to make money for your retirement. Now, if you ask that question of people my age, they all say no. But if you ask that question of younger people, a surprising share of them, maybe as much as a third, will say, oh yeah, I think that's a good idea. It's a smart way to make money. I'll gamble. Well, everybody in the industry will say, don't count on this as a way to make money. We want you to be entertained. We want you to have fun. We want you to enjoy the possibility of winning some money. We want you to enjoy the whole experience, but don't count on this as a way to make a lot of money, because it is not likely to happen. It might. In fact, Steve Wynn, some years ago, talking about the roulette wheel in his casino, he said, look, I want somebody to win. Somebody's going to win. I want people to win. But I also know that for the most part, they're not going to. But that's a decision they have to make. But is it a smart way to make money with no work at all? Well, that's doubtful. So, is it harmless? We already talked about a bit. I mentioned this already. Addiction to gambling has no early warning signs. You can look around in your student populations. You will not be able to spot a budding gambling addict. And as a matter of fact, it doesn't really necessarily even have any outward signs when it is full-fledged addiction. We've had the experience in the Nebraska program, serious gamblers, people with serious problems, doctor, lawyer, pharmacist, member of our state legislature, bank loan officer, bookkeeper in a small business. These people don't look like they have an addiction problem. You can't tell it by looking at them. In fact, what I told a state senator a few years ago, I said, Senator, that gambler looks like you or me. We don't know from looking at him. Not only does it have no outward signs when it's in full-fledged gambling trouble, but also no early warning signs. You can't know if your student is going to become a gambling addict any more than you can know if they're going to be successful at anything in life. You just have to do the best you can to educate themselves. No matter how much psychological science, psychiatric science, and neuroscience have studied this phenomenon and other addictions, nobody knows for sure why people get into deep trouble. Others avoid it. Why can some people have a few alcoholic drinks with no problem? Others go off the deep end. Why can some people gamble, have fun, go home, enjoy the rest of life? Others cannot. Nobody knows for sure why this is so. We just have to face the reality that we don't know, and we can't know, and we can't predict it ahead of time. People with gambling disorder present with the whole array of problems. These are the most predictable and the most frequently cited, and that, of course, is financial, but emotional, legal problems, stealing money. Suicide is a major issue in this subject matter. In Nebraska, about 5% of the people who present for counseling service have thought that suicide was the only way out, so they gave it a try. About 25% have thought of it, but at least did not attempt it. But still, very high rates of suicide thinking and attempts. Easy money. Is it an easy way to make money? Well, again, we have no animosity to the gambling industry. We're not trying to stop people from gambling at all. It is not crooked. It is not rigged up. People think, oh, it's all rigged. Well, no, that's not true. But it is carefully engineered, very carefully organized, to be certain that the promoter of the gambling business is making a profit. After all, if you go to the casino, you don't have to pay a ticket to get in the door. Now, if you go to a movie, there's a ticket. You got to pay at the ticket window. Ball game, whatever. those kinds of entertainment activities require you to pay for them up front. When you go to the casino, not at all. Somehow or other, though, in the process of operating the games, the promoter is in it to make a profit. How do they do it? Well, some gamblers will win, some a lot, but most will lose some or all. This is a principle that permeates all forms of gambling. The lottery is really a good example of that. If you think about the Powerball, hundreds of millions of tickets are sold. And by far, most of the people who buy a ticket win nothing. The lottery accumulates a lot of money in order that a few can win the big jackpot prizes. And this is all very sophisticated technology. It's based upon the higher mathematics of probability. Probability is an amazing and interesting subject matter. The study of probability by mathematicians actually began a few hundred years ago at the insistence of a gambler. There was a gambler, I think in England, maybe, I don't know where, but he was trying to figure out why he couldn't make more money gambling. He wanted to make more money at it. So he talked to a scientist that he knew. These are pretty famous scientists. Anyway, how can I do this? Well, that started the scientist thinking. In those days, mathematics is all key to that. How can we predict the probability or likelihood of an event when we don't know for certain that it's going to happen? We know it probably will happen, probably sooner or later, but do we know for sure when? We don't. So let's develop the mathematics of probability. And probability is the key to everything. Now, I like the example of the roulette wheel just because it's such a familiar image. You think of the roulette wheel in a casino. When you look at the wheel, you see that there are red and black pockets and green pockets where the ball can drop in when it spins around. 18 red, 18 black, 2 green. This is the American roulette wheel pattern. And if the ball goes on a green pocket, every bet loses. So that means, in other words, that if you bet on red, you have what? 18 chances to win and 20 chances to lose. And that's the mathematics of the roulette wheel. And that, again, nobody knows where the ball is going to drop, but it's going to drop for certain in one of those 38 pockets. But the mathematics of it assure the casino that they're going to win 53% of the times that the wheel is spun. One of the other things we talk about with betting, especially again with sports betting, is it makes it so much more fun to be engaged in the game. I don't bet on sports. I love to watch baseball because of the skill that it takes, or tennis, the level of skill of these athletes. You can cheer for the athlete, you can cheer for the skill, you can cheer because of the intricacy of the 11 men on the football team and how they all have to do their assigned task. But what happens when you add gambling to it? You're seeing some of this in the news. A professional golfer being heckled at the tee by a gambler who's talking about how he's got a bet on him. How are you going to play this hole? Threatens the coaches. The athletes are getting threatened. People are getting these messages. I know where you live. It's become unpleasant for a lot of people. Is that fun? Is that your idea of fun? When you can do this when you can risk this kind of thing happening? And trust in the game. For years and years, the athletic entities, the professional leagues, the NC2A, they all talk about, oh, we can't have gambling. That really was behind that law. It was called PASPA, that was enacted years ago by the Congress. That is to say, wait a minute, we want to protect the integrity of the sport. This is the Olympic message, the integrity of the athletic competition. Now, you're seeing in the news pretty frequently that there's somebody's been arrested. The baseball coach is trying to get some wagers placed on a game because he's got some inside information. A professional basketball player checking out of the game, claiming to be injured in order to make his buddies win their prop bets. These kinds of things are happening, and I'm telling you, it's happening more than we know. There are serious people in law enforcement, including our FBI, that are focusing on the risk that this is going to increase, and it erodes the trust in the game. Is that fun? Does that make it more fun to watch the game if you suspect that somebody's not playing to their full potential because they've got a side bet going on? I asked the question. I don't know the answer. What happens to somebody when they get into trouble because they're gambling? These are some of the things we hear from clients when they come into our counseling services. For the most part, by the time somebody gets to the point of seeing a counselor, they are really desperate. That 20-year time span between start of gambling and seeking help, they've been gambling pretty persistently over those years, off and on, but getting in worse and worse trouble. By the time they get to the counselor's office, they are desperate. They want help. Help me stop doing this. This quote here, this is word for word from a gambler. I don't know why I did it. She knew what was going to happen, but she went in, she cannot explain why she did what she did, but she did it. She did it anyway. People say repeatedly, I can't quit. They come in, they've stolen money, stole from their employer, they've embezzled, I mean, it's a real problem. And this is what happens when gambling gets out of sight, out of line, out of control. People are ashamed, they're embarrassed. We think this prevents a lot of people from even coming forward. They're too ashamed with what they've done. They just cannot bear what the stigma of admitting that they've done this, that they've gotten into such trouble. So what do we do with counseling when people come in? It's very difficult. It's very difficult to work with this form of addiction, mainly because gambling, of course, again, is so pervasive. The counselor, though, is there to help the client, not tell the client, you have to be what I want you to be, but we have to help you be what you want to be. We have to help you work your way through these stages of change. Where are you? We meet you where you are. Are you ready to move ahead? Are you ready to change your life? If you're ready, we're here to help you. We'll help you with some strategies. We'll help you with some ideas, some ways you can get away from doing this. It's not easy. In fact, again, we have people who are trying to get rid of the gambling habit. Every time they go in the gas station, there's a device there. They can't escape it. It's very, very difficult. But with a counselor, they try to work that individual through stages of change. This theory is called a trans-theoretical model, has been developed by psychologists to try to give a frame of reference to a therapist. This is how you can work your people through the solution to their problems. How does it help? Well, again, start off by recognizing that the client has a disorder. It's not for so long, weak-willed, oh, you're immoral, it's all your fault. Just quit doing it. Just quit doing that. Well, we know no more than it ever worked with drugs. Just say no to drugs. How'd that work out? Same thing's going to work with gambling. It's just not going to work to just tell people quit doing that. So counselors use a variety of approaches and theories. These are some of them. CBT, motivational interviewing. There's a long list of theoretical approaches to counseling. what counts most is just the relationship between the counselor and the client. If they have a good relationship, then they can make some headway toward solving the problem by whatever method the counselor works with. We think it's a public health disorder. We are a public program here at the Nebraska Gamblers Assistance Office. We use public money to help with a problem that results from decisions made by state policymakers. Somebody decided at the state level we should be promoting these kinds of activities. When there was a petition drive, the public was told, we're going to have casinos. We're going to bring in a lot of money to help you with your property tax bill. It's a public decision made by the public when they sign a petition, made by the public when they vote, made by the representatives in the legislature. This is a public decision to promote an activity to generate money for government businesses. So public should take charge. And this is we want it to be considered to be a problem affecting the whole of society. So what are we going to do about it? Well, I think, again, truth, education, pull back the curtain. I love Frank Morgan and The Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. But the fact is, the man behind the curtain is the man operating the casino, the slot machine. The best example we have of progress toward dealing with a behavioral problem is smoking tobacco, addiction to nicotine. Over many, many years, with the effort of many, many people at all levels, both medical, scientific, legal, Congress, courts, all of it, education. There's been significant progress to deal with that problem of nicotine addiction. It's the best example we have of a whole of society effort to deal with a problem. Education, regulation, consumer protection. Let people know what's really going on. Teaching young people about how gambling really works. What are the true odds of winning? Let them find out for themselves if they want to do it, but give them the information they need to be smart consumers. Where do we think gambling is heading? Well, here it is. You know, in America, our free enterprise system, when somebody has an idea, everybody else copies it, and pretty soon, here we go. The gambling industry will continue to expand until the market is saturated. You know, there's not unlimited money to be spent on gambling. The Federal Reserve Bank in St. Louis maintains a checklist, we call it. It's kind of like the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. Well, there's another one called the personal expenditure consumption. Okay, so personal consumption expenditures on services, not merchandise. And of the spending money on services, gambling is on the list. And it runs around 1% year after year when they tabulate this of all spending. In other words, there is not unlimited money that will be spent out of the American economy on gambling. It's going to have its natural limit. So the market will be saturated. People will not spend more and more, except as the economy grows. New ways to gamble, of course. The smartphone is the coming thing. I told you about half a dozen casinos, 10,000 slot machines in Nebraska. We probably have 3 or 4 million smartphones. Those are the next slot machines, the next gambling activities that we're going to be dealing with. So our little program here in Nebraska, we'll continue what we're doing and deal with the increasing demand for services, fighting for a budget to make it possible for us to do this. Now, that's the end of my sermonette here. And I had talked to John about answering questions. And of course, I sailed right past that. John, do you have any questions I can answer?
Yeah, we did, David. We had a question earlier when you were chatting a little bit about the financial literacy education piece. Do you know if the financial literacy is an evidence-based strategy and a prevention for gambling or gambling education and prevention?
Actually, I don't think it is evidence-based. I think it's experience-based. And that is virtually everything we're doing is not based upon sound um, evidence of efficacy. There's because we're all in our program here, and I think Matt, you're going to hear from him about the high school. It's stuff we're trying to figure out the best way to do it. We're figuring it out based on experience. We keep track of experience. Now that's our evidence. Our evidence is the experience we've had. It's not based upon laboratory experiments. It's just based upon what we know, what we think it works. So we're going to give it a try, see if it works, hope it works. If it doesn't, we'll keep fiddling with it, try to make it better. So if you talk about evidence-based, the evidentiary basis for it is not based upon, a randomized trial, is based upon experience.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Teresa, for putting that link into the chat for everybody to see. Are there any other questions that we have for David? No.
Okay, we're done.
Done. That's right. And right on
Thank you.
time. Yeah,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much. Yeah, right on time. How about that? Okay.
There you go. Thank you,
Teresa's
David.
up next. Yeah, Teresa's up
Teresa
next.
is up next. We have a
Yeah,
5-minute stretch break. We will begin with Teresa Foray from the
yeah.
North American Epic Global Solutions right at 11 a.m. So if anybody needs to stretch, let's go ahead and do so, and we'll get things switched over for everyone. Thank you, David.
Thank you.